Picture this. It's October 2025, and you've driven halfway across the country to see Yellowstone National Park. You pull up to the entrance and find the gates locked. Closed. Not for weather, not for repairs. Closed because the United States government shut down. For 43 days, national parks went dark, and 900,000 federal employees were sent home because Congress and the president could not agree on a budget. Moments like these remind us that government budgets affect much more than politicians in Washington. They influence our daily lives, from highways and schools to Social Security and national defense. The rest of the world watched in disbelief. How does the wealthiest country on earth end up unable to pay its own bills? To answer that, we need to understand government budgets and fiscal policy, where the money comes from, where it goes, and how spending and taxes shape the entire economy. Setting the context. Fiscal policy is the use of government spending and taxes to influence the economy. It's one of two big levers policymakers can pull. The other is monetary policy, which the Federal Reserve controls. Fiscal policy belongs to Congress and the president, and that's exactly why it gets so political. Let's start with the spending side. Many Americans assume the federal government has been growing without limit, but the numbers tell a calmer story. Since 1960, federal spending has mostly stayed between 18 and 22% of GDP. What has changed is the mix. Defense spending has generally declined as a share of the economy, while Social Security and healthcare, Medicare for seniors and Medicaid for low-income Americans, have grown steadily. Add interest payments on past borrowing, and those four categories alone eat up roughly 60% of the federal budget. Everything else, highways, courts, science, education, foreign affairs, fits into the remaining 40%. And don't forget the states. State and local governments spend about $3.3 trillion in 2021, with education as the single biggest item. In fact, about 90 cents of every education dollar in America is spent at the state and local level, not by Washington. One more difference. Nearly every state is legally required to balance its budget. The federal government faces no such rule, and that's where things get interesting. Main points. So where does federal money come from? The biggest single source is the individual income tax, the one due every April 15th. Close behind is the payroll tax, which funds Social Security and Medicare. Together, those two account for more than 85% of federal revenue. Corporate income taxes, excise taxes on things like gasoline and tobacco, and the estate tax make up the rest. Not all taxes work the same way, and here's a vocabulary set worth remembering. A progressive tax takes a larger share of income from high earners. The income tax works this way, with marginal rates that climb as income rises. A proportional tax takes the same flat percentage from everyone, like the Medicare payroll tax. A regressive tax takes a smaller share from high earners. Surprisingly, Social Security fits that description because the tax stops at a wage cap. In 2025, income above $176,000 wasn't taxed for Social Security at all. Now for the two words people confuse constantly: deficit and debt. The deficit is not the debt. A budget deficit happens in a single year when the government spends more than it collects. A surplus is the reverse, and a balanced budget means the two are equal. The national debt is the running total of all past deficits and surpluses combined. Think of a college student who borrows $10,000 a year for 4 years. Each year's deficit is $10,000, but the accumulated debt at graduation is $40,000. America's borrowing history follows a clear rhythm. The government ran massive deficits to fight World War II, then mostly modest ones for decades. Deficits grew large in the 1980s and early 1990s, flipped to surpluses from 1998 to 2001, and then have returned ever since. The Great Recession of 2007 to 2009 pushed the deficit to 9.6% of GDP. Then came 2020, when pandemic spending drove the deficit to $3.1 trillion, about 15% of GDP, the largest since World War II. So how does the government use these tools on purpose? When the economy sinks into recession, producing below its potential, expansionary fiscal policy, tax cuts, spending increases, or both, boosts aggregate demand and pushes output back toward full employment. When the economy overheats and inflation builds, contractionary fiscal policy does the opposite. Spending cuts or tax increases cool demand down. Which tool to use is usually a political choice. Conservatives tend to prefer tax cuts. Liberals tend to prefer spending. In 2009, Washington split the difference with an $830 billion stimulus that included both. Here's the part many students miss. Some fiscal policy happens automatically, with no vote in Congress at all. These automatic stabilizers are built into existing law. When a recession hits, incomes fall, so tax collections drop on their own, while spending on unemployment insurance and food assistance rises as people apply for help. In a boom, the process reverses. Stabilizers only offset about 10% in output, but like shock absorbers on a car, they soften the worst bumps. Application and deeper example. If fiscal policy can fight recessions, why not use it constantly? Because in practice, deliberate or discretionary, fiscal policy runs into some stubborn problems. Start with interest rates. When the government borrows heavily, it competes with businesses and households for financial capital, which pushes interest rates up. Higher rates discourage private borrowing and spending, canceling out part of the stimulus. Economists call this crowding out. Then there's timing. It takes months to recognize that a recession has even started, the recognition lag. It takes more months for Congress to debate, negotiate, and pass a bill, the legislative lag. And once the bill is signed, the money still has to reach agencies and projects, the implementation lag. Add those together, and a stimulus designed for today's recession might not arrive until the recovery is already underway, hitting the economy at exactly the wrong moment. As former Treasury Secretary George Shultz put it, the economist's lag is the politician's nightmare. Politics creates its own distortion. Countercyclical policy asks leaders to spend during hard times and tighten during good times. Politicians happily do the first half. Tax cuts and new spending are always popular. But almost no one campaigns on raising taxes during a boom. By the mid-1990s, many economists had concluded that discretionary fiscal policy was a blunt instrument, more like a club than a scalpel, best saved for severe downturns, while automatic stabilizers and monetary policy handle routine bumps. Which brings us to a recurring proposal. Why not amend the Constitution to require a balanced budget every year? In 1995, such an amendment passed the House and failed in the Senate by a single vote. Most economists are skeptical for a simple reason. A strict balance requirement would disable the automatic stabilizers, forcing tax hikes or spending cuts in the middle of a recession and making downturns worse. The popular argument that government should balance its budget like a household doesn't hold up either. Households borrow for houses, cars, and college all the time. And a nation can run modest deficits for decades while its debt burden shrinks, as long as the economy grows faster than the debt. That's exactly what America did from World War II until about 1980. Conclusion and key takeaways. Let's bring it back to those locked gates at Yellowstone. Government shutdowns aren't really about park rangers or entrance fees. They are collisions over spending priorities, the debt ceiling, and healthcare policy. Proof that every budget is a political document as much as an economic one. So here's what to carry with you. Federal spending has stayed within a fairly steady range of GDP, but its makeup has shifted towards Social Security and healthcare. Taxes can be progressive, proportional, or regressive, and America uses all three. The deficit is 1 year's shortfall. The debt is the lifetime total. Expansionary policy fights recessions, contractionary policy fights inflation, and automatic stabilizers quietly do some of that work on their own. But lags, crowding out, and political incentives make deliberate fiscal policy hard to aim. Managing the nation's budget isn't just arithmetic. It's a continuing argument about what we value, and every taxpayer has a stake in how it turns out. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and join us for the next lesson as we continue exploring the fascinating world of economics. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.